Hi, and welcome to part 6 of our PowerShell Universal tutorial series. So far, we've seen how to create API routes and endpoints, as well as create a simple GUI using a visual designer. And I also foreshadowed basically this video on how we can create GUIs or web interfaces purely throughout code. So this is what this video is we're going to do is we're going to create our Hello World app that we created through the GUI last time. We're going to create it completely through code. So let's just take a quick look at what we had last time here. So let's go into our app here and let's load it up. So we had this label here that said home, and we had a button that said click me. Once you clicked it, it changed the text to hello world. So again, very, very simple, nothing too complicated there. The only thing is, when we go to edit our homepage, it will always be loading with the visual designer. It does have a code view, but that code view is purely read-only. You cannot change the text here. It is purely read-only. If we try to edit it, we get this cannot edit in read-only editor. That is the one caveat of PowerShell Universal. If you design a page using the designer, you have to use the designer. You cannot edit the code of the page. If you use the code to design the page, you cannot use the designer, which can make placing items a little bit more difficult if you're not super familiar with CSS or HTML. But luckily, PowerShell Universal gives us a pretty good interface with a grid system to be able to design our page very easily. And there's even ways that we can use grid layouts where we can actually design the layout of our app and then have a JSON of the layout that we would want that we can use in our app later. We will see that in a future video because that's a little bit more complicated. Today, we just want to get into the code editor and be able to create a nice little app by code and try to place some items around in the grid. So let's actually go ahead and let's get started here by going ahead and clicking on new page on our app here. We're going to call this Hello World. I'm going to call this Hello World here. And the URL we're going to leave blank because it just uses the name. And we want to make sure that we uncheck this use designer to make sure that we're designing it through code. Once we do that, it's going to create our page here. I'm just going to open it in full screen here and just zoom in a little bit so you guys can actually see a little bit more of what's actually going on. So we have this designer here, which is the code designer. So this is where we're going to be actually editing our code. We're just going to hit save. We're going to exit this right now because what we actually have to do, which it says in the comments, to use this page in the dashboard, we do need to change the GetUD page to GetUD page Hello World instead of home. So let's just edit that here. So we can just put Hello World. It's not case sensitive if I remember correctly. So once we actually do the GetUD page, we can actually view the app and we get presented with our new page, which is called Hello World, and we have nothing in there. So let's go ahead and let's edit this page now. So the first thing we're going to want to do is just add in a very, very simple label, which is going to be our home label. We're just going to place this just to see what it actually ends up looking like. So the nice thing about PowerShell Universal, as we've seen a lot in our API editors, is we have IntelliSense. So if we do new, we get a bunch of different options that actually pop up for us. What we want is a new UD typography. And what I always do for every element is I always start off by assigning an ID. This will let us reference this element later on and be able to interact with it. So we're going to put an LBL hello. And then what we're going to do is we are going to put the text here. Let's put the text to home. This way it's going to be exactly like our other app here. And we're just going to hit save. We're going to exit the full screen here. We're going to go into our app. And there is our home right here. Perfect. So that seems all good. So now we're going to go into back into our code here. And all we want to do is add a button because that is really the only other piece to our page. But we're going to be able to actually modify how it looks later on. So once we have our new UD button, we're once again want to put an ID here. For the ID, we're going to put BTN click me. And then we are going to want to put the text as click me with an exclamation mark here. And then we're going to do an on click with an open and close parentheses. Now this is where we're going to be actually telling it what it's going to do on an on click event. This is where we want to do a set UD element. And this is where assigning IDs is very important because we're going to specify the ID of the element that we want to set, which is going to be LBL hello. And we need to then put in a properties parameter and then do a hash table here. So we're going to do the @ symbol and then the open close parentheses. And all we're going to do is text is going to equal open and close quotes here. Hello world exclamation mark. So if we actually go ahead, we save that. We exit out of full screen here. We come back here. Here is our app. We have home and we have our click me button, and our click me button does work, but it does not look the same. It's not placed kind of like in the middle-ish area. And also the button is at the same level as our label and not underneath. Now this is where our grid system comes into play here. So we're just going to go into full screen once again, and we're just going to go over what the grid is. So a grid is very, very similar to a tic-tac-toe grid. The only thing is it is going to have 12 little boxes per row. And you can make a box a size 2, a size 3, size 1, size 6. So you can have 2 size 6 boxes, 3 size 4 boxes. You can have a size 2 and a size 10, 1 size 12. Basically, you get to do as many configurations of 12 as you really want. And PowerShell Universal has a very, very good documentation on this here. I'm actually just going to pull that up actually right now. So let's open up another tab here. We actually have this very, very nice picture here. I'm going to see if we can make this a little bit bigger. Perfect. So we have our 12 here. We have our 2 6s, our 4 3s. If you're familiar with CSS, especially Bootstrap, this is going to be very, very familiar for you, where we specify these sizes, and you can specify the screen size that that block is for, which lets you really make mobile friendly apps. So if your screen is extra small, you can make something take up the whole line. Whereas if something is large, you only want it to take it 4. So we're going to see how that actually works. We're going to go into full screen here, and we're actually going to go ahead and design our grid. So the first thing that we need to do is create the actual container of our grid. So we're going to do a new UD grid. And this one is going to be the container. And the content, we're going to do an open and close curly brackets. This is where we're going to be putting all of our different rows and columns of our grid. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a new UD grid. New UD grid. And we want to make this as an item here. And this is where we can do extra small. If we do large, you can also do extra large size, medium size. So in theory, if you just specify one, it'll be the same for all of them. But you might want to, depending on your app, create some custom, like different sizes, depending on the size of the screen to make it look good. That would require some testing, of course. So what we can do here is we can actually say that extra small is going to be, let's say 6 here. And then we're going to put content, open and close bracket. And then we're going to do a new UD grid item extra small size is going to be 6. Content, open and close parentheses, curly brackets. What we're going to do is we're just going to stick our code into this one here. We're going to see what happens when we do that. So we have our one grid here, and we have 2 boxes of 6. So in theory, these should still be on the same line, but it'll move where the actual content is. So just so you guys know what it looks like right now is this. So let's go ahead, let's hit save. Now let's go back to our app here, and there it is. So it's moved. So we can pretty much say that the first box is right here, and then the second box is going to be over here, and we have our click me, and the click me still works. So what we want to do is really we want to put this click me right below the hello world here. So let's go ahead and let's do that. So let's go back to our page here. All we want to do is really copy paste these 2 grids and just paste them below here. All I want to do is take out the typography out of the second one and then take the button out of the first one. So what we actually have here is we just shrink this down because there's nothing in it and there's nothing in this one either. So we have our first grid, which is 6, our grid item, which is 6, our second grid items, which is 6. So that takes up the full 12. That makes up the first row there. And we have our label on the second part of the first row. And then we have another row starting with 6, which is empty. And then our other section, which is 6, will have the button here. So we can actually go ahead and we can save that. And let's go ahead and let's minimize this. And let's go ahead and view here. So here we have our button below our label, which is exactly what we were expecting. And if we click on it, it still changes the text. And what we can actually do is, because the button was a little bit bigger in our app that we designed, we can actually change that as well. So we have our button here. We can change the size of the button. So we can do a size, and we can do a large size button. If we go ahead and now we hit save and we go back, it is a little bit bigger. Now, if you wanted to stretch it to the size of the actual content there, which is the 6, you can just do a full width here, and this is where it's going to look a little bit weirder. So if we actually go back, load the app, we have our button that takes up that full 6th width now. Now, we don't actually want that. So what we could do is we can now modify our grid. So let's actually just separate this out here. We can make a little comment here of second row. Now we could change all of these grids here. So let's just add another grid. And all we're going to do is we're going to make them all size 4. And we're just going to remove the label here out of this one. And we're just going to copy paste this empty one after the button. And once again, we're just going to make all of these 4. And we're going to see what that actually changes. So if we minimize, save that, go back out here, we can see that we have a little bit different. Our button now is more centered, still bigger than it was. So there are a lot of different things that you can actually do with that. We can even change, if we go back to full screen here, if we change this one to 5, make both empty ones 5, and then the ones with content set to 2 here, we will see that we can make it look, again, very, very different. And there it is. So that is basically very, very similar to how it looked like through the designer view. So if we do hello world, we can actually copy that here. And if we paste this in here, I believe we can access it through this page here. We cannot. But let's go ahead and let's just take a look at what it looked like before. So if we do home here, this is what it looked like before. And then if we do hello world, this is what it looks like through the code view. So very, very, very similar. As you can tell, it requires a little bit more of a hands-on approach when you're doing it through code. Let's just zoom out a little bit here. You guys should still be able to see this quite a fair bit, and it's able to show the entire code. So really, when it comes down to placement, especially when you're designing it through code, it's going to be really using the grid and playing around with the different sizes. And what's going to happen, of course, is if we do, let's say, let's change all these extra smalls to a large size here. Now you're going to notice that nothing's really going to have changed. So if we actually do that, save it, and we go back here, nothing's changed. And that's because in our setting here, we only set the large, and now as you can see, it's lost that design. So what we would actually want to do here, and once we get it back, it's done. So what you'd actually want to do is really set up each of these. I usually always set up so if you set up the extra small size, everything else will follow. But if you do the large sizes first, that's where it starts to lose it. So what we can do is if we added in an extra small size here, we can actually put that to, let's say, 6, and then extra small size is going to be 6. And then this one, maybe we actually want to do extra small size. Oops. I just noticed that these are extra large size. These should be extra small size. This is going to be 0. And then we are going to just copy paste these here. And what's going to happen is we are going to have different sizes of elements based on the size of our window here. So once we save this, we go back to our screen here. Oh, and the minimum size is actually 1. I thought we could just do 0. So that is something to keep in mind. So you would have to make this at least a 1 here, and this at least a 1, which is perfectly fine. Let's save that. What we'll want to do though is change this to a 5, and change this to a 5, and then this to a 2. So these are all things that you will have to play around with, especially when designing your app. I am by no means a front-end designer to design something that would feel really, really good. But here we are, we have our large size screen. And once we shrink that down and expand it, we can see that it's keeping that extra small sizing. I'm just struggling expanding this window. There you go, it's expanding. It still has that size. And there you go. So it finally hit that extra large screen size, and it's now changed. So as long as you have your key changing spots, that's all that really, really matters. That's why I always specify the extra small size by default for myself. I just really, really prefer that. So I will do 2 here. I just removed the large sizes. I prefer that if I make it look good with the extra small size, make sure it looks good on mobile, make sure it looks good on your desktop as well. Again, it's going to really depend on what type of content you have and how you want to really display that to your end users. But I would always just be sure to make sure you shrink that screen size when you're testing it. Make sure that it looks good. Make sure that there's nothing that's like gets too squished or that doesn't look quite right or that breaks the flow of your app. Especially if people are going to be using it on a phone, which if you're making apps for technicians, there is a high chance that they might be using their phones to maybe, especially if you're making an Active Directory app like we will be, it could be handy that they are able to access it on their phone and it be usable on their phone. So now we've seen how to create a GUI through code, through the visual designer. We're actually going to start taking, and we've seen the grid view that we can actually really start placing our elements exactly where we want with our code view. We're going to take a look at a few more elements in this tutorial series. And then we're going to be starting off our project, which is going to be making that Active Directory help desk tool. If you guys want to see any specific elements in PowerShell Universal, please let me know in the comment section down below. If you guys have another idea of another app that you guys would like us to make on the channel using PowerShell Universal, please let me know in the comment section down below. Again, thank you for watching the video. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and also hit that notification bell to be notified when that next video comes out. And I will see you guys on the next video.